Folks, we are very pleased today to have a special guest. I talked to him just before I met him, a few days or maybe a week or so before I met him. He was one of the participants and the presenter at the summit that we held last Tuesday in Washington, D.C. at the Family Research Council headquarters. And help us understand what is going on in San Antonio, which I believe is a bellwether for what is coming to the entire country. And he's here today. As usual, we're going to let him introduce himself and tell you a little bit about himself and what he's doing there. But I believe that the leadership he has provided is critical, not only for San Antonio, but critical for this country, and what he's going to share with us today about the potential appointment of the former mayor, or the mayor, I guess, of San Antonio as Secretary of HUD, why that is so dangerous for the United States of America. Folks, please welcome Pastor Charles Flowers of San Antonio, Texas. Pastor Flowers, please feel free to tell everybody what church you pastor and organization that you head up and what's been going on in San Antonio. Take 7 to 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bishop Jackson, for the opportunity to do so. And I'm glad to be in the company of like-minded people who understand that if a stand is not taken, we're going to pass something to our next generation that we would literally be ashamed of. But because the stand is being made, I believe that God works with a remnant, and he will work with this remnant in order to restore the original intention of this nation, to put it back on course for that original intent to be fulfilled. And so I'm Pastor Charles Flowers. I pastor Faith Outreach Center International here in San Antonio, Texas, where I also serve as the president of two pastors' gatherings. One is called the Gathering of Pastors and Leaders of San Antonio. That encompasses both senior pastors, their staff, and some parachurch ministries. And the other organization I serve as president of, the San Antonio Association of Churches, which is, as the name implies, all church, a group of churches. Together, those two groups number about 140 churches and organizations here in the city of San Antonio. It's those voices that were raised in our city council last summer when Mayor Castro, he actually used one of the other councilmen, Councilman Bernal, to head the marketing of the non-discrimination ordinance. And that's a false term, but it began being called the sexual orientation regulation because that didn't have the emotional clout that it needed in order to pass the psychological test here in San Antonio for the general population. They changed the name of it to the non-discrimination ordinance, obviously because discrimination has left a bad taste in the mouth of all Americans because of the civil rights movement, and because the LGBT is trying to adopt the civil rights movement as an extension of it. It is an illegitimate extension of the civil rights movement, however. But it's trying to attach itself to the emotional trail that the civil rights movement has left here in America. So they changed the name to the NDO, and we raised voices, went around to counsel people in each of their offices, a organized event of thousands of people visiting council offices here in San Antonio that culminated in the vote that they took here in our city, 7-3, 7 for the ordinance and 3 against it. They were able to dismiss the greatest upheaval of voices against that ordinance because of our voting record. As I said at the conference last week, many of the citizens in San Antonio, when it came to putting the council and city council into office, in fact, 93.3% of all registered voters did not vote in the last election. And those 6.7 that did put that regime into office. And because we, by and large, were not participatory in the voting process, the city council dismissed this great upheaval of voices. They passed what they falsely called a non-discrimination ordinance. In its beginning, we were able to get them to shave some of the things off of that ordinance, but in its original state, it fined $500 a day to anyone who spoke against LGBT. It also had in place in the ordinance that if you were found to have in the past spoken against them, you could be dismissed from a city post, like in city council and so forth. It still remains that the whole issue about running for city council and the fine, the $500 fine, is still in place. Should you be should you be accused of wrongful speech against the LGBT, which is, it is so unprecedented and so far-reaching that the mayor of Houston, who herself is a very outspoken lesbian, has adopted the San Antonio ordinance to try to institute it in the city of Houston. Some things are blocking that from happening because of Houston city government, but the point is that she saw this as such a top-drawer effort as far as that is concerned, that she sought to adopt San Antonio's ordinance to the city of Houston. And so we have been fighting that effectively, very effectively. We're gearing up for our election in 2015, really to sweep the city council, get everyone out of office, and put the right people in offices, but really what we should have done in the beginning through our voting process. But we're going to continue to press in that way toward 2015. Last thing I think I want to say before questions and answers, and if you, Bishop, you want me to address anything else before questions and answers, I'll do that. But the other thing is the mayor's appointment. The mayor has been he has been awarded, or rewarded, I should say, for his violation of religious liberty and rights, religious right here in the city of San Antonio, because that $500 a day fine was levied upon public accommodations. So if I have a business here in the city of San Antonio that is a public accommodation, a restaurant or any other place where the public can come in and be served, and what we had to fight also was to keep the church, the concept of church, out of that definition of public accommodation. And we were effective in doing that. Otherwise, the language was so vague that public accommodations could be considered churches. And if anyone would be found to speak against them, they would be fined $500 a day. That's $15,000 a month. And that's every month until that issue is settled, or until the person managing that public accommodation capitulates and says, okay, LGBT is okay. Well, obviously, that is an infringement upon free speech, upon religious freedom. The First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law restricting, establishing religion or restricting the free exercise thereof. So if I'm a citizen and I have a conviction, I run a public accommodation as an entrepreneur, businessman, or woman, I want to be able to let my Christian convictions be lived out in the business that I established. But that ordinance flew right in the face of that. And so we had to fight it because it's really a religious liberty issue. It's a free speech issue as well, that a person feels a certain way or have a certain conviction against that lifestyle. They should be able to speak without impunity, at least certainly not impunity from the law in 2014 here in America. But those are the kinds of things that are being pushed. And so the mayor, Julian Castro, who you know is the darling of the Democratic Party and a quickly rising Latino American here in our country, has been rewarded now with an appointment to the Secretary of HUD. Now, what that does is it allows him at a federal level to begin the same kind of intolerance toward religious freedom and free speech that he exercised here in the city of San Antonio. And for many of us here, that is of grave concern. And anything that can be done to block that appointment, or at least, at the very least, to raise a strong voice of concern and put him on watch as to what he will do as the Secretary of HUD as it relates to religious freedom and free speech. So, Bishop, if you want me to address anything else, I will. I just wanted to take that time.
Pastor Flowers, I think you've laid it out very, very cogently. Folks, if you have a question or comment, press *6 and get in queue. We already have people on the line, but press *6 and get in queue because I want you to have an opportunity to talk to Pastor Flowers, who's been in the thick of this. Would you address, before we start taking the calls, you have a letter that I know the pastors in San Antonio have drafted that we're going to put together a nationwide letter in support of you all to try to stop this appointment. But tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll take some phone calls.
Yes, we were glad to be able to speak with you, Bishop, and the group of leaders that were there in Washington at the FRC last week about this issue, about his appointment. I'm aware that the political structure, both Republican and Democrat, he presents a problem for the Republican Party because he is the son of an immigrant worker, and he's Hispanic. He's a minority, Hispanic. So to speak against that, seeing that they have already certain woes against them where immigration and all that matter is concerned, it would be difficult. They have figured it would be difficult for them to speak against his appointment because it would be another thing that the Democratic side would raise as an accusation against conservatism, and they have, by and large, chosen not to fight the fight to resist his appointment. But we here in the city of San Antonio, as you said at the beginning of this call, Bishop, we have firsthand eyewitness dealings with Mayor Julian Castro. And we know he's an intelligent, well-spoken, likable personality. And we know that all of that can and more than likely will, based on his track record, present national issues where free speech and the free exercise of religion is concerned. And so we wrote a letter to that end asking anyone and everyone who can participate in blocking this appointment, please do so.
Well, folks, as Pastor Flowers said, the implications are staggering because it's got to mean that if you're a business that does business with the city of San Antonio, that you've got to be careful that none of your employees, at least publicly, on Facebook, on Twitter, in any venue that can be identified with your business or that can link them back to your business, to say anything about believing that marriage is a union between one man and one woman, because if they do, you may end up, or your business may end up getting punished for it, and you could end up losing business or being put out of business if your business does a lot of revenue, gets a lot of its revenue from the city. So the implications
Bishop,
of this,
they can't even get a contract with the city because the contract literally has a line on it where you have to sign if you're going to work with the city. You have to sign off on your belief that the LGBT movement is, or the LGBT lifestyle is like a non-discrimination clause, and included in that clause is sexual orientation. You literally have to sign off on that as a part of your contract with the city. If you don't sign off, you don't get the contract.
Wow. So your conscience is automatically on the line just in order to even do business with the city.
That's right.
Amazing. Okay, well, Daniel, let's go to the phones. Again, press *6, folks, if you want to get in queue to ask a question or make a comment. Remember, this is not just San Antonio. This is coming to a city near you. It's coming to your city because the president is going to appoint this man as Secretary of HUD, and the implications of that, again, are very, very far-reaching. Don't think because, well, I don't live in public housing, so that doesn't affect me. Oh, it's going to affect everyone. Let there be no doubt about that.